Hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over how to create preset icons to control the scale. So if I bring up the example script that we have again, and I'm going to create a quick join system here. So in the example script that we have, if I click the make test icons to set scale, or more accurately, there we go. So if I think I was using the old script, not the new script, or I was using the one we're working on and not the example one. So when I click the make test icons to set scale, you see it creates a series of controls here. It creates an FK control, it creates a pole vector control, depending on whether I have the pole vector active or not. It creates an IK arm control, and it creates, in this case, a hand icon. And this is all very dependent upon what rig type I select initially. So we have all these controls here. The only two that can really move are the hand control, because usually you want that positioned above the hand, but since we don't have a hand joint in this particular script here, I just give you the option to move the control wherever you want it. And the pole vector control is set up using a very unique way to get the perfect pole vector position. So this is, if I rotate the joints here, you're going to see this icon is designed the way it's set up to perfectly be in the correct position to apply a pole vector icon to an IK handle as a pole vector constraint. So this will always be in the right spot. And we're going to go through how to set all this up. Now, if you can see here, if I change the icon options here, you can see it affects how the icon looks. So I just changed the IK control to a 4 arrows control, or a D-pad control. I can change the FK control to turn arrows. I can change the hand icon to a slightly different shape. I can turn the pole vector control into an arrow. And all of these, besides these two being able to move, they're designed just to pretty much scale and get what I'm looking for in terms of the size of the controls here. And we're going to go over how to set all this up. I might, depending on how long this video goes, add another video on how to connect the option menus to the controls as they are. It kind of just depends on how long this video goes. So now that we have shown what we're going to do, we're going to get back into the script here that we were working on in the previous video, and we're going to start building the function. So obviously, as I did in the previous video, the first thing I need to do is make the command in the GUI object, which is the button in this case. I still don't have the script open, so making the command for this button here. And that button is located right here. So I'm going to add the command flag, and just like I did in the previous ones, I'm going to include the script name variable here. So we're going to do script name plus, then in quotations, dot, let's see, I'm just going to call this arm icon scale, open and close parentheses. All right, so now that I have that function name, make sure icon is capitalized there. So now that I've got that function name, I'm going to bring that down and create the function for, there we go. Create the function again. We don't need the star args because we're using the script name variable here. So we'll just move on to the main script here. So the first thing I usually do when creating a function like this, I'm just going to add a few more spaces here. The first thing I'm going to do when I've got a function here is I'm going to start defining variables based on the GUI objects, as well as, get the selected variable and all of that. So I'm going to start by querying all the objects here that I need. So the first thing obviously is I'm going to need the rig type, so that'll determine what icons should be visible when I create all this. So I'm just going to use arm type equals dot radio button group, and in this case it is, it's called, let me just double check just to make sure, arm type, there it is. So arm type button, let's make sure that the names line up there. So, and I'm going to query it, so q equals true, sl equals true for selected. So I've queried the options here. I queried what rig type it's going to be. The next thing I need to do is query the option menus for all these four, just to determine what icon I have selected here when I run this button, because I can set these options and then run it. And so I obviously want what's in here to be the icon visible. So I'm just going to quick copy and paste this stuff from the example script here just to show you. So I'm just going to space this out a little bit. And there we go. So I have the option menus for the IK here, the FK, the pole vector, and the hand. And I've queried them, and I've queried their selections. So I've got that. The only other thing I need is I need to determine whether I have the pole vector radio button selected. And to do that, I need to query the radio button for that. And so I'm going to copy and paste that in here. So I'll just call this PV type. So one thing I just want to take a look at first, just to make sure everything's lining up here. Okay, so everything kind of lines up here. All right, so I have that for the pole vector, and then the last thing is I need to get selected. So obviously what I need here is the ls command. So I'm just going to run selected equals PM. You should get very familiar with this command if you haven't already. This is the command for selected. And since I am selecting the root joint, I need to make sure that DAG equals true, so it includes in the selected the children of the root joint, so it'll include the second and third joints. And this is just as kind of a security measure for my selection, just to make sure I only select joints. I include type equals joint. So this makes sure that when I select it, just in case if there's any like groups or anything underneath it, that I'm making sure I'm selecting only the joints. So now that I've got that, now we can move on to the creating of the controls. Now, there's a number of ways for how you want to do this. I always say there's about 5 different ways to do anything in Maya when it comes to rigging. So this is kind of one of those, whatever is your personal preference. If you want to make the icons individually, you can do that. What I do for my setup is I make the controls and then combine the shapes of those controls under one main node so that I can, all the icons are technically under one control, and I can swap out the shape nodes to visibly change the icon. So I can move the icon around, but I can change the shape, which shape is visible, so that it's still in the same place, but the icons can change, how they look. So I'm going to go through how I go about that. So one thing I want to make sure here. All right. So the first icon I'm going to create is the IK control. And as you see here, the IK control is made up of 3 shapes. So it's made up of a cube shape, a D-pad or 4 arrow shape, and a 4-pin shape, which you'll see in a little bit what that is. Actually, I can make that visible here. So if I set 4-pin, that's what it looks like there. So 4-pin, 4 arrows, and the cube. And they're all, you can see, the same size. So when I switch them out, it's all still the same under the same control. So even if I change the shape, you see we're still under the same icon. So first things first is we're going to create that IK control. So what I do is I create each control individually, and I'm going to parent the shapes together and combine everything. So first I'm going to create the cube. So I'm just going to start copying and pasting stuff in here. So this is the cube. This is all the code for that, as you can see here. And what this command is doing is this is just giving me what I'm looking for essentially here is the shape node, and this is going to give me the shape node. So that's what the ls for, and the dag is for, because the dag gets me the children of the node, and the shape node is always the child of the transform node, which in this case is this here, the IK box. So, and I also like to keep notes on what I'm doing as I go along. So I'm just going to label this variables. And so in here, I'm creating the IK icon. And this is the cube. And so next one is the 4 arrows. And that code for that is in here. There's going to be a little bit more on this one, and I'll explain what all that is. So this is creating the arrow control here that you just saw. This has the same ls command as the previous one. All this in here, this is essentially just to get the arrows icon in the right position. I'm doing this based on controls I already had created and kind of stored, and so, but they weren't in the right position at default. So this just kind of gets it in the right position that I'm looking for, and just kind of freezes it just to make sure that it's all in the right spot. So with the 4 arrows done, I'm also making sure that they all also have the appropriate scale, because these controls when I make them are of different size. So this is just, I'm scaling this one down to make sure it's the same size as the cube. And next we've got the 4-pin here. And I'm going to copy and paste all that in here as well. Okay. And again, this is creating the 4-pin. There's a lot more involved with this, creating this control here. And again, this is just, I'm rotating it and scaling it and freezing transforms to get it in the right position. So once I have, these are the 3 controls, and I've used the ls command to get the shape node for each of these controls here. Now I'm going to create an empty group and kind of parent all of these controls together under that one group. So I'll type this one out. So I'm just going to call this ik control equals pm.group. You should already be pretty familiar with what I'm doing here. This should be pretty standard and straightforward as far as combining multiple controls under one node here. But I'm just going to call this, I just call this arm ik scale test don't delete. I use it in all caps and I say don't delete just in case someone was thinking of deleting it. It's just kind of a precautionary measure here, just in case someone else wanted to use this script. So now that I've got that, now I'm going to parent the shape nodes of these three controls underneath this empty group that I just created. So that is the parent command. And what I'm going to do is take the variable for the ls command for the control, and I'm going to do bracket, not bracket q, bracket 1. So this gives me the shape node for that control. And so I'm going to do the same thing for the other two. So the arrows list and the 4-pin list. Okay. And then the last thing I select is this ik control here. And bar equals true, and s equals true for shape. So this is just essentially taking the shape nodes of these three and putting it under the group. And so the next thing I want to do here is I want to take the so what happens when I parent shapes under an empty group here, the original transform nodes that these shape nodes were under stay behind, and they just stay there, and it clutters up your outliner, and I don't want to see those in there anymore. So we have to go about deleting them. Now, you would think that just, using a delete command with these would be the right way to do it, but I've run into some errors with that, and it caused me a lot of problems when I just wanted to delete it. It wouldn't let me delete it. So what I ended up having to do is take all these shape nodes, or all these transform nodes that were left behind. I put them in a list, and then towards the end of the script, I just run a loop deleting all those transform nodes. I don't know why that's the case, but I think it's just because it didn't want me to delete these right away. It wanted me to wait until I had to wait until everything else was done, so I could delete everything. So I could delete all those empty transform nodes. So that's just what I'm going to do. So as I had before, the way I do that is I'm going to, above creating the controls, I'm going to create a couple of empty lists. Or at least for right now, I'm just going to create one list. So transform list equals empty brackets. So this just means I've created an empty list, and what I can do is I can start to append things to this list, and then I will delete everything in that list later. So now that I've created the control, what I'm going to do is append all these transform nodes to it. So I'll take transform lists dot append, and I'm going to take these empty transform nodes. So just like you see here when I got the shape nodes, I'm just going to do the bracket 0 instead to get the transform nodes. Except I cannot do these one at a time. Forgot about that. So I have to do these individually. Dot append There we go. Let's get rid of that comma there. We're going to clip that out as well. And one last time. Okay. So now I've parented those old transforms under a list. And so now what I need to do is hide. All right, I forgot to label this. So degroup. So next is setting visibility. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to set which icon is visible here in the option menu, or which icon I've selected in the option menu, and I'm going to hide the other shape nodes. So I'm just going to copy and paste it in here. So as you can remember, I got the variable for the option menu based on what I have selected here. And as we learned in the previous video, the best way to use information from an option menu is to just use an if statement. So that's what I'm pasting in here. So what I have here is saying that if the IK shape, meaning if the option menu is on the first one, meaning the box, what I want to do is turn on and off the shape nodes, or turn off the other shape nodes. So for option 1 is the box here, so I want to turn off the IK arrows and the 4-pin. So by default, all these shapes are visible, so I just need to turn off the 2 that aren't selected here. So I just say the IK arrows, because that's the name of this, and I just include the word shape here and turn the visibility to 0, just using a simple setEditor command. So I turn the IK arrows and the 4-pin off there. If the shape node is, if the option menu for the IK is set to 2, I know that's 4 arrows, so turn the other 2 off, so on and so forth.